The night Renata left Lily at my apartment, she hugged me for exactly 2 seconds. I counted. Not because I was suspicious, I wasn't, not yet, but because I noticed the way her body was already angled toward the door before her arms even closed around me. That's the thing about Renata. She was always halfway somewhere else, even when she was standing right in front of you. I told myself it was stress. I told myself it was the conference, the packing, the rush. I watched her fold herself into that rideshare without a single glance back at her stepdaughter sitting on my couch, and I thought, she must really trust me. It took me another 4 days to understand that what I had mistaken for trust was something much more calculated than that. I have a photograph of Renata and me from when I was 9 years old. We're standing in front of our grandmother's house in Nogales, both of us squinting against the October sun. Renata has her arm around my shoulders in that proprietorial way older sisters have, and I'm leaning into her like she's a wall I've built my whole life against. I used to love that photograph. I kept it on my refrigerator for years, one of those small magnet frames that came in a pack of 4 from the dollar section at Target. I took it down eventually, not dramatically, not in a rage. I just took it down one Tuesday morning and put it in a drawer, and I stood there for a moment looking at the clean square of white where it had been, and I thought, yes, that's more accurate. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That's what I do. I skip to the part where I finally did something, because the part before it is harder to talk about. The part before it is the part where I was complicit. Not in the way Renata was complicit, not in the way Douglas was complicit, but complicit the way that good, loyal, terrified people are complicit, by choosing, over and over again, not to look directly at the thing that was in front of me. Let me start from the beginning. The real beginning, not the dramatic one. I grew up being Renata's person. That was the family taxonomy. Renata was the beautiful one, the magnetic one, the one who cried loudly at movies and laughed too hard at her own jokes and walked into rooms like she was already mid-story. And I was the one who drove her home when she'd had too much to drink, who covered her shifts when she called in, who listened at midnight when the latest man had broken her heart in the latest predictable way. Our mother called it devotion. She said it like it was a compliment. She had no idea, or maybe she did, and just didn't say it, that what she was actually describing was a child who had been trained to confuse love with availability. My name is Marlo. Marlo Vasquez, though nobody ever calls me anything but Marlo except Renata, who has called me Lolo since we were small and has never once asked whether I still like it. I'm 34. I work from home as a medical transcriptionist. I listen to recorded physician notes and type them into clinical documents, which means my days are spent translating other people's precise, technical language about the human body into permanent record. I am, professionally, someone who makes sure the right information ends up in the right place. I find a quiet satisfaction in that. The irony of that skill set, given what happened, is not lost on me. My apartment is small, 1 bedroom, a kitchen that opens into a living area, a bathroom that gets good light in the mornings. I keep it organized. Not in an anxious way, just in the way of someone who spends most of her day there and needs the space to feel deliberate. My couch is the nicest thing I own. Soft gray upholstery, slightly oversized for the room, bought on a payment plan 2 years ago. I remember thinking when I bought it, this is a good couch for guests. I have always, in some way, been preparing my life for other people's needs. Renata lives 40 minutes north of me, in a neighborhood called Saguaro Ridge that has a homeowners association and a gate that doesn't always work. She married Douglas Cole 6 years ago, which was about 4 years after she'd told me she would never marry a man who already had a child. She said that at the kitchen table of our mother's house, eating leftover rice and beans, and she said it with the absolute certainty that only 28-year-old women can muster about their own future preferences. Then she met Douglas, and Douglas had Lily, and Renata rewrote the sentence so smoothly that I don't think she even noticed she'd done it. Lily was 4 when they married. She is 10 now. She has dark eyes and very still hands and the particular kind of quietness that children develop not because they are naturally quiet, but because quiet has been the only option available to them. I should have understood that sooner. I noticed it, I filed it away, and I chose to call it shyness. The Tuesday night Renata showed up. I want to describe it exactly because the details matter. and because I have replayed it so many times that they are completely clear. It was 11:12 at night. I know because I had just finished the last file in my work queue and closed my laptop. I was in my pajamas, about to make chamomile tea, and my phone rang with Renata's name. Before I could say anything beyond hello, she was already talking, that particular rhythm of hers where the urgency comes first and the logic comes after, if it comes at all. Lolo, I need you. I have this conference in Vancouver. It's a last-minute thing. The whole team has to go. I found out 2 days ago, and Douglas is in Phoenix for the whole week. And I cannot leave Lily home alone. She's 10, and my flight is at 6:30 tomorrow morning. She didn't ask. She never actually asked. She just described the situation until the shape of what she needed became undeniable, and then she waited for me to fill the gap. That was her technique. She could construct helplessness like an architect. How long? I said. Just a week, maybe 8 days. I'll send you money for food. She never sent money for food. They arrived at 11:40. Renata in a blazer she hadn't bothered to button, Lily in sweatpants, and a unicorn hoodie she had clearly been sleeping in, carrying her single backpack the way you carry something you have carefully chosen, not the way you pack when someone tells you to grab enough for a week. There was no activity bag, no extra shoes, no jacket appropriate for anything colder than 70 degrees. There was a worn library book and a small stuffed dog tucked under her arm, and the look of a child who understood, without having been told explicitly, that something was shifting again in the ground beneath her feet. Renata kissed me on both cheeks. She smelled like the perfume she'd been wearing since she was 22, jasmine and something woody underneath, the kind of scent that becomes a person's whole identity because they stopped noticing themselves wearing it. She said, "You're an angel, Lolo. I don't know what I'd do without you." She said it warmly. She said it quickly, and she was already moving toward the door. That hug, 2 seconds, body already angled toward the street. I watched the rideshare pull away, and then I looked down at Lily, who was looking up at me with the careful neutrality of someone waiting to find out what kind of situation they've landed in. I said, "Are you hungry?" She shook her head. I said, "Do you want to pick what we watch?" And something in her face softened just slightly, and she said, "Okay." I made up the couch with the blanket I keep for guests, the one with small cream-colored flowers that I bought because it looked cheerful. I got her a glass of water. I checked that my Wi-Fi password was written on the notepad by the lamp. I did everything I would do for any guest, and I tried not to notice that a child arriving at someone's home at midnight with one backpack and a stuffed dog did not typically feel like a normal situation. I told myself, Renata is a lot, but she loves Lily. I told myself that the way I had told myself many things about Renata, not because evidence supported it, but because the alternative was too uncomfortable to sit with. By day 2, I started seeing things. Not dramatically. There was no single moment of revelation, just an accumulation of small, specific details that didn't quite fit together the way they were supposed to. Lily ate slowly and with the concentrated attention of someone who is used to mealtimes being uncertain. Not the way picky children eat, picking around the edges of things. The way careful children eat, monitoring the whole situation, how much food there is, how long it might last, whether it's okay to ask for more. I made scrambled eggs the first morning and she ate everything on her plate and then sat with her hands in her lap and waited, and I said, "There's more in the pan." And the look on her face was so small and so careful that I had to turn back to the stove and stay there a moment. She flinched at loud sounds. Not exaggerated, not theatrical, just a small involuntary tightening of the shoulders, a brief contraction, the body doing what bodies do when they have learned to preempt disruption. I dropped a pan lid on day 2 and she was off the couch immediately, standing upright, and then she saw my face and slowly sat back down. She said, "Sorry." I said, "What are you sorry for?" She didn't answer. She did not talk about home. Children talk about home. Even children who are having a difficult time at home talk about it, obliquely, comparatively, in the way of complaints about something they nonetheless believe is permanent and stable. My mom makes me eat this. My dad doesn't let me watch that. Lily talked about school a little. She talked about her library book. She talked about a classmate named Priya who had a dog with only 3 legs. She did not once say anything that placed her inside her own house in any normal, ordinary way. I noticed all of this. I kept it in my head the way I keep everything organized, cross-referenced, sitting in a neat row where I can look at it without letting it disturb me. I was still, at this point, assigning benign explanations. Lily was a quiet child. Lily was in an unfamiliar place. Lily had been uprooted at midnight, which would unsettle any 10-year-old. I called Renata on day 3. It went to voicemail. I texted. She replied 6 hours later, "Vancouver is beautiful, so busy. Lily good," 3 words about her stepdaughter, then a request for confirmation that the child was fine so that she could return to whatever she was actually doing. I typed back, "She's good. Call when you can, I have a question." She didn't call. Day 4 was a Wednesday. I had work. I always have work. But I had a large batch of cardiology reports that required concentration. So I set Lily up at the kitchen table with a school worksheet her teacher had apparently sent home before the week began. She had a pencil and a pencil case, and a particular way of holding her pencil with her whole fist, not her fingers, which I knew was common in children who hadn't quite locked in the grip, but was also something that could use some practice. I sat down next to her, the way I used to sit next to neighborhood kids when I tutored in college, just to keep her company while I went through my own files. After a while, she started asking me things, small things, the meaning of a word on the worksheet, whether a whale was a mammal or a fish. I answered without making a production of it. Then she said, very quietly, without looking up from her paper, "Does anyone else live here?" I said, "No, just me." A pause. She kept drawing the letters on her worksheet. Then, "Do you ever get scared at night?" I said no, mostly honestly. I said I liked the quiet. She nodded slowly, still looking at her paper. Then she said, and I almost missed it, it was that soft, "I don't like when they fight at night because then I can't tell if it's going to stop." 7 words, because then I can't tell if it's going to stop. I put my pen down. Very deliberately, very carefully, I put my pen down and I kept my face entirely still, because I knew that if I reacted in a way that felt large to her, she would close. Children who speak in those small, careful ways have learned the exact cost of being overheard, and the last thing I wanted was for her to retreat from whatever she had just decided to trust me with. I said, "Does it happen a lot, the fighting?" She kept her eyes on her paper. She drew a perfect lowercase e in the margin of her worksheet. Then she said, "Renata says it's not fighting, it's just talking loud." I stayed very still. She said, "But it's not the same." I said, "No, it's not." And then she picked up her pencil and went back to her worksheet, and I understood that for now, for her, that was as much as she could offer. I did not push. I did not ask another question. I just sat there with her in the warm kitchen of my small apartment, the Tucson afternoon pressing yellow against the window, and I felt something very precise and very quiet crystallize in my chest, not rage, not yet, but the exact opposite of doubt. I had spent 4 days finding reasons to be uncertain. Those 7 words closed every single one of them. That evening, after Lily was asleep, I sat at my kitchen table and I did what I am trained to do. I documented. I pulled up a new document on my laptop and I wrote down everything. Not emotionally, no adjectives, no drama, the way I write clinical notes. Time, observation, detail, the single backpack with no jacket, the careful way she ate, the way she stood up when the pan lid dropped, the fact that Renata had not called in 4 days, the things Lily said about fighting at night. Then I sat back and I read what I had written and I thought about Renata, about what I had allowed myself to overlook over the years, about the individual moments that I had sorted into the Renata is complicated folder and left there. The time she called me from a parking lot at 2 a.m, crying, saying Douglas had gone through her phone and called her a liar in front of Lily. I had said, "Do you want to come here?" She had said no. She'd said it was a misunderstanding, and I had accepted that, and by morning she was texting me a photograph of the brunch Douglas had apparently made to apologize, and I had thought, they're okay. I had wanted them to be okay, so I saw what supported that. The time I came for Christmas, and Douglas corrected Lily at the dinner table 3 times in a row, once for how she was holding her fork, and once for interrupting, and once for what was apparently laughing too loudly. and each correction was delivered in the exact same mild, measured tone, and Lily each time went very still and said sorry and got slightly smaller, and I had thought, Douglas is strict. I had even thought, in some horrible concession to his framing of things, Lily does interrupt a lot. The time Renata called me to complain about Lily, not in a parental frustration way, but in a particular, distancing way, saying she's so much like her mother, I don't know what to do with her. And I had felt a private discomfort that I had not named aloud, because nomming it aloud would have required me to say something to Renata that I did not yet have the architecture to say. I had been filing for years, and now I had a folder that was full. The next day, I called a woman named Denise Aguirre. She works at a family advocacy organization in South Tucson. I knew her tangentially through a neighbor, had met her twice at community events, knew what she did without knowing whether I would ever need to know what she did. I needed to know now. I said, I have a child staying with me. She's my niece, stepdaughter of my sister. I want to understand what I'm looking at. Denise was calm and specific. She didn't ask me to narrate anything I wasn't ready to narrate. She told me what the relevant behavioral patterns could indicate. She told me about the reporting structure in Arizona and what the threshold for action was and what the process looked like. She asked me if the child had said anything specific, and I read from my document because I had it right there, because I document things, because that is the thing I am good at that I had never understood was also a form of protection. She told me I had done the right thing by writing it down. She said she could give me a referral contact at the County Child Protective Services intake line. She said I should call if anything more concrete surfaced, and she said, carefully, in the particular language of someone who has given this speech before, that a child's disclosure, even an indirect one, is meaningful, and that children do not typically speak that way unless speaking that way is true. I thanked her and hung up. I sat with my phone in my hand for a long time. Then I called our mother. My mother is a complicated woman. She is loving in a way that is real but conditional on a version of the family that she has decided she needs to maintain. She believes in handling things privately. She believes in working it out. She has said more than once that airing family problems invites other people's judgment, and that families should be loyal to each other even when they are imperfect. I love her. I also understand, now more than I did at 30, that some of those beliefs have served Renata very well over the years. I did not tell her everything. I told her enough. I said, Mama, I need you to listen to me carefully because I'm going to tell you something, and I need you not to make it about protecting Renata. She went quiet. The particular quality of her quiet was one I recognized, the pre-defensive stillness. I said, I think Lily is in a situation that is not okay. I don't know the full shape of it yet, but I need you to hear me when I say that I will not be talked out of pursuing it, and I will not be quiet about it to preserve family appearances, and if Renata calls you before she calls me, I need you to tell her that. My mother said, Marlo, you don't know what you're. I said, Mama, she told me she can't tell if the fighting is going to stop. Silence, a longer kind of silence. Then my mother said, very quietly, what did she say exactly? I told her. I read from the document. My mother was quiet for so long that I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, Oh, Mija. Just that. Oh, Mija. And I could hear in her voice that this was not the first time something had reached her ears, just the first time someone had made her sit still long enough to hear it. Renata called on day 7. Not for any reason connected to what I had done, not because she knew anything. She called because she was arriving back in Tucson the following afternoon and needed me to have Lily ready. Her voice was breezy and a little distracted, the way it always was when she was transitioning from one chapter of herself to the next. She said, How was she? Did she behave? I said, She was wonderful. She said, She can be exhausting, honestly. She needs so much reassurance, it's a lot. I said, She's 10, Renata. A small pause. I know how old she is, Lolo. I said, I know you do. There was something in my voice, not aggressive, just flat, that she registered. I heard her recalibrate. Are you okay? You sound tired. I'm fine. I'll have her ready at 2. I hung up. I sat in my kitchen and I drank my coffee and I let myself feel, for just one moment, the full weight of the thing I was about to do. Here is what I had. By the time Renata's car pulled into my parking lot at 2:17 the following afternoon, I had my documented notes from the 8 days, behavioral observations, Lily's direct statements, timestamps, context, written in the precise and emotionally neutral language of someone who documents for a living. I had a phone call log showing 7 attempts to reach Renata that went unanswered or were responded to with texts only. I had a conversation with Denise at the Family Advocacy Organization and a referral number at County CPS intake. I had a conversation with a family law attorney, a woman named Patricia Roon who did a free 30-minute consultation by phone, who told me exactly what a non-custodial adult relative could and could not do, and what documenting a child's welfare disclosures meant in the context of a potential investigation. I had a conversation with my mother, who had, in the days between our call and this afternoon, spoken to 2 relatives on the extended family side who had apparently held their own quiet observations about Lily for longer than anyone had said aloud. I had sent a copy of my documentation to 3 places: my own email, my mother's email, and a sealed envelope in my desk drawer. And I had told Lily, the morning before she left, that she could call me any time, that my number was in the front pocket of her backpack, and that nothing she told me would ever get her in trouble with me. I said it once clearly, without making it feel large. She looked at me for a long moment and then she nodded, and she said, "Okay, Tia Marlowe." She had been calling me Tia for 2 days by then. She'd started it herself. When Renata came in, she looked the way she always looked when she returned from something, slightly disheveled in that curated way of hers, perfume refreshed but makeup worn, projecting the comfortable exhaustion of a woman who has just managed something impressive. She scooped Lily into a hug that lasted about as long as her hug to me had lasted 8 days ago, said, "I missed you, baby," and Lily said, "Hi, Renata." Not "Hi, Mom," and Renata either didn't notice or chose not to. I made tea. I set cups on the table. Renata sat down and started talking about Vancouver, the conference, the people she'd met, a restaurant Douglas had recommended that she hadn't had time to try. She was comfortable. She was at ease. She had no idea what the week had contained. I let her talk. I poured the tea. I waited. Then I sat down across from her and I placed a single sheet of paper on the table between us. Not my full document, just a clean summary, the kind I would write as a final notation on a patient file. Brief, specific, entirely without inflection. She looked at it. She looked at me. "What is this?" "Something I'm submitting to CPS intake this evening," I said. "I wanted you to have the chance to see it first." The change in her face was interesting. Not guilt, not immediately. First it was confusion, the genuine kind, the kind that comes from someone who has organized their entire world around the belief that certain people will never hold them accountable. Then it was something sharper, a search, rapid and calculated, for which angle to use. She chose sisterhood first. Of course she did. Lolo, what are you? You can't do this. I'm her stepmother. I love her. This is crazy. You don't understand what it's like living with Douglas. You don't understand." "I know what it's like for Lily," I said. "She told me." "She's 10. She doesn't children exaggerate. They misunderstand things. What exactly did she say? Because I guarantee." "It's all in the document, Renata." She pushed the paper back toward me. "Marlowe, look at me, look at me." She reached across the table and put her hand over mine, the old gesture, the one from 1,000 kitchen tables across our shared life. "I need you on my side right now. It has not been easy, but I am handling it. I am handling it. If you call CPS, you blow everything up. Is that what you want? Is that what you want for this family?" I looked at her hand on mine. I thought about how much I had organized my life around the warmth of that hand. How many nights I had picked up the phone because I wanted to be the person she called. How many years I had kept her secrets because keeping them was how I proved I loved her. I took my hand back, not violently, just back. "Lily said she can't tell if the fighting is going to stop," I said. "She said that to me at the kitchen table. She was doing a worksheet. She wasn't being dramatic. She said it the way you say something you've been carrying a long time and you just set it down for a moment because you're tired. Renata's mouth opened and then closed. I said, "The question isn't whether I'm on your side, Renata. The question is why you left her there." She tried 4 more angles in the next 20 minutes. She tried appealing to my sense of family loyalty. She tried suggesting that I was jealous of her marriage, which was the most obviously desperate move, and which I let pass without response. She tried telling me that Douglas had never actually harmed Lily, that it was emotional, that it wasn't the kind of thing CPS would even care about. That last one was the most revealing, because it told me she knew the shape of what was happening even if she had spent years refusing to look at it directly. I said, "I've spoken with a family law attorney. I know what falls within scope." She went very still at that. I said, "I also spoke with Mama." Something passed over Renata's face then that I had never seen there before. Not anger, something closer to fear. Because our mother's silence had always been one of her structural supports, and I had, apparently, done something to that silence. She said quietly, "What did Mama say?" She said, "Oh, Mija." I paused. And then she cried for about 10 minutes, and then she told me about a conversation she had with Tia Carmen 3 years ago that she decided not to pass along. Renata looked at the table. I said, "You've had a lot of people deciding not to pass things along." A long silence. Outside, the Tucson afternoon was doing what it does in late October, the light going amber and long across the parking lot, the kind of light that makes everything look quieter than it is. Renata said, very quietly, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to submit the documentation tonight, not to punish you, because a child told me she was afraid in her own home, and I am not the kind of person who hears that and does nothing." "And what about me?" I looked at my sister for a long moment. She looked older than 38 sitting there, older and genuinely uncertain, which was not a state I had seen her in very often. There was something in me that still wanted to fix it, to find the angle that made it better, to say something that would let us both walk away with the sisterhood intact. That part of me is real. I won't pretend it wasn't pulling. But I had spent 8 days sleeping on the other side of the wall from a child who flinched at loud sounds, and I could not honor that pull any more than I could unknow what I knew. I said, "That depends entirely on what you do next." I filed the documentation at 4:47 that afternoon. I filed it exactly as I had prepared it, precise, observed, time-stamped, documented. I included the contact at the Family Advocacy Organization as a reference. I included my statement and Lily's direct words. 2 days later, a caseworker called me. She asked me to walk through the documentation. I did. She was professional and careful, the way people in that work tend to be, neither alarmed nor dismissive, operating from a place of process. She told me the next steps. She told me what would happen. What happened over the following 3 months is a matter of record somewhere in the Arizona Department of Child Safety System, and I am not going to narrate every step of it, partly because it was slow and bureaucratic and procedural, and partly because it was not mine to narrate. It was Lily's. What I can tell you is this: the investigation was opened. Douglas was interviewed. Several things were confirmed that I had suspected, and several things emerged that I had not known. The outcome was not what a revenge story, the satisfying kind, would promise you. There was no dramatic confrontation where Douglas confessed everything and Renata collapsed in tears. There was no single moment of cinematic justice. What there was process, and documentation, and a child welfare system, imperfect as it is, doing something when given enough specific information to act on. Douglas and Renata separated before the end of November. I do not know whose decision that was, functionally, whether Renata finally chose Lily or whether Renata chose, as she often did, the option that would make her look best in whatever narrative she was constructing. I am deliberately not making that call. I have limited information, and I have learned, a person who should be careful about filling in the gaps with what I expect to find. Lily's biological mother, a woman named Cassandra who had lost custody 6 years ago but had maintained supervised visitation, was contacted as part of the investigation process. Cassandra had, in those 6 years, done the kind of work that made the custody conversation a different one than it might have been before. That is a story I hope goes well. I believe it will. I say that based on one phone call I had with Cassandra in December, which was the strangest and most human conversation I had all year. 2 women who had both, in different ways, been circling Lily without being able to reach her, suddenly talking directly. She thanked me. I said I had just done what needed doing. She said, "That's the thing, though, most people don't." And I didn't know what to say to that, so I said thank you back, and we stayed on the line a little while longer in the way you do when you've just shared something real with someone you don't quite know how to place yet. Renata and I have not spoken since November. That is not a decision I made dramatically. I did not call her and announce that we were done. I simply stopped answering in the way I always had. She has called. She has sent texts that begin with Lolo and end with appeals to sisterhood and family and the history of us. She sent one that said, "I know I let you down, but you have to understand what I was dealing with." She sent one that said, "You have no idea what it cost me to keep that household together." She sent one that was just our grandmother's name. Abuela would not have wanted this for us, as if invoking the dead was a reasonable bargaining position. I read them. I set my phone down. I got up and made coffee or walked around the block or went back to my work queue, which always has something in it that requires focus. I want to be clear about something, because I think it's important, and I think it is the part that would be easiest to get wrong. I do not hate Renata. I have thought about this carefully, and I mean it. Hating her would require me to believe she is a simpler person than she is, and I don't think that simplicity would actually feel like justice. What I feel when I think about her is something more complicated, a kind of exhausted grief, the specific grief of a person who has finally acknowledged that the version of someone they loved was never entirely real. Renata was not a monster. She was a woman who had spent her life arranging other people's love into a system that served her, and who had made, somewhere along the way, the decision that a child's suffering was an acceptable cost of that system. That is not the same as being a monster. It is, in some ways, worse, because it is the kind of wrong that people do while fully believing they are still fundamentally good. She believed, I think genuinely, that she loved Lily. She believed it the way some people believe things that contradict the reality they are simultaneously creating, because the belief costs nothing and makes you feel better about yourself, and the reality costs everything and makes you feel like the person you actually are. I have spent 34 years loving Renata through that gap. I am 34 years old and I am tired, and I am done. What changed, I think, is not that I stopped loving her. What changed is that I stopped needing her to be the person she had always convinced me she was. Those are different things, and distinguishing them has taken me most of my adult life. I used to think that being the dependable one, the constant one, the one who never caused problems, I used to think that was just my personality, a temperament I was born with. I understand now that it was a strategy I developed early and never updated, a response to a family dynamic where Renata's needs consistently occupied the center and I had learned to orbit. I was the stable planet. She was the sun. And everyone praised me for being stable without anyone ever noticing that stability, in the way I'd been performing it, was just suppressed need wearing a responsible face. I think about that 9-year-old in the photograph, leaning against her sister like she's a wall, and I want to go back and tell her, she is not a wall, she is a weather system, and you do not have to organize yourself around weather. I have one other thing to tell you, and I want to get it right because it is the part that matters most. In early December, I received a drawing in the mail. It came in a standard white envelope with my name, and address written in the careful, slightly uneven handwriting of a 10-year-old who takes her letters seriously. Inside was a drawing done in colored pencil, a woman at a kitchen table with a cup of something hot, and a smaller figure beside her, both of them looking at something off the edge of the page. The woman had dark hair. The smaller figure had a stuffed dog on the table next to her. At the bottom, in the same careful handwriting, it said, "Thank you for the blanket. I still have the number. Lily." I sat with that drawing for a very long time. I put it on my refrigerator. Not in a frame, just tacked up at the corner the way children's drawings are supposed to go, slightly crooked, taking up more space than they have any technical right to. I have looked at it every day since. The woman in the drawing is sitting straight. That detail took me a while to notice. She is not leaning into anything. I took the photograph of me and Renata out of the drawer last week. I looked at it for a while, the two of us in front of our grandmother's house, Renata's arm around my shoulders, me leaning in. I looked at my 9-year-old face and the way I'm squinting against the sun, and the way even at that age I'm slightly positioned, slightly angled, toward someone else. I put the photograph back in the drawer, not because I hate the memory, because I no longer need the reminder of who I was. I know who I am now. I am a woman who makes up her couch with a soft blanket for people who need it. I am a woman who keeps notes. I am a woman who listens very carefully when people speak quietly. I am a woman who, when a 10-year-old child sets down something she has been carrying for a long time, does not pick it up and put it back. I am not, any longer, a woman who confuses loyalty with silence. I understand now that those two things were never the same. They only looked the same from a certain angle, in a certain light, when I was standing in a position that benefited someone else. I'm not standing there anymore. Renata's last text came 3 days ago. It was brief, which surprised me. She is not typically brief when she wants something. It said, "I heard Lily is going to be with Cassandra. I hope you know what you did." I read it twice. I thought about it for a moment. The precision of what she'd chosen to say. The particular venom of "I hope you know what you did" directed at the person who had filed a child welfare report, rather than at the person who had made one necessary. I set my phone down. I went back to my work queue. I opened the next file, a cardiologist in Phoenix, dictating a follow-up note on a patient with a repaired heart. I put on my headphones. I started to type. She left her daughter on my couch with one backpack and trusted that I would stay quiet. And she was right about almost everything, except for who I was by the time she came back to collect her. If this story stayed with you, if any part of it felt true, subscribe and stay close. There are more stories like this one. Not easy stories, but real ones. And sometimes the most important thing a voice can do is refuse to stay quiet.